Yeah, but she wasn't recorded as being present, so we might alter that, show that she was in attendance. Would that be the correct way of doing that? Yep. Thank you. So all in favour that that's a correct record with that minor amendment, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? No. Thank you. Right, so item 1 is the consents division activity, and we have Bruce Halligan, who's the manager of the consents area at the moment, to present his report. Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Conscious of your time, so I'll take the report itself as read, but there have been some developments in some of the contents since I wrote this document, so I'll just bring some of those to your attention. So working on page 11, just firstly down the bottom of page 11, I've referred to Aurora Grant's comment to Environment Canterbury at the moment, seeing some good benefits flowing through from that comment already in terms of information sharing, and we're also having the ability to tap into some of Environment Canterbury's training resources. Moving over to page 12, just an update on 2 applications for resource consent that went to hearings earlier this year. Offspring Travel Limited and Field & Cruises. Both of those were heard by Mr. Sharon McGarry, Independent Hearing Commissioner, and she's released decisions on those in the beginning of this week, 29th of March. The Offspring Travel application was granted in part. The application itself was non-complying. Some elements of the application were granted and others were declined. And the other application by Field & Cruises Limited was non-complying and was declined in full. Both of those applications became non-complying due to the over-allocation of trip numbers in the Doubtful Sound Patea complex under the Regional Coastal Plan. So that's a bit of rationale behind those decisions. They're available on the website. You can send the link if you're interested in looking at those. Just slowing down again on page 12, the forecasted activity. Sorry, I wrote this report about 2 days before the government's announcement on deferring the intensive winter grazing provisions. Now, though only some of those provisions have been deferred until May 2022, we are boxing on with seeking to stand up a lodgement platform for intensive winter grazing applications and getting that live hopefully by mid-April. We have got applications already in the system for intensive winter grazing, and a number of other applications the consultants have been working on that they're looking to lodge in the near future, looking to get ahead of the game, which is also good for us in terms of managing the workload component of it. So rest assured we're not doing nothing in the intensive winter grazing space, and there's certainly some applications in the system already. Just sort of moving on, click over to the top of page 15. Just the heavy line application. We have arranged a hearing date for that now in the week from the 17th to the 21st of May. It's going to be heard in Invercargill at the Invercargill Working Men's Club before Independent Hearing Commissioner Alan Cubitt, who's an experienced RMA practitioner and obviously holds the Making Good Decisions Chairmanship qualification. The other application there at the top of page 15, the application by Peter Clinton Partnership for the Managed Aquifer Recharge. The hearing's been held, yet to have a decision on that one. Just moving over to page 16, about halfway down, I've talked about the Consents Consultants Working Group, which is a forum we have every month with the regular consultants we deal with. Finding that really useful in terms of sort of engaging in collaborative dialogue and highlighting any pressure points in the consent process and seeing if we can smooth some of those. The topical one at the moment is the amount of review we're requiring on dairy effluent structures, both the ponds themselves and some of the other ancillary structures on dairy farms. So we're looking to take on board some of the feedback we've had on that, and we've got a revised approach to that out for consideration by the consultants at the moment. There's a balancing act on that. We're looking to obviously mitigate some risk as the consent authority, but also make sure we don't overkill that and create unnecessary levels of cost or expenditure. So it's getting that balancing act right, really. Flicking over just to page 17, I've referred to the COVID fast track process, COVID-19 fast track consenting processes. Some councils are getting a number of these applications, which are effectively a opportunity which some applicants are choosing to take to bypass some aspects of the standard RMA process for projects that they consider have significant socio-economic benefit. We're yet to have an application of that type in Southland at the moment, but we're certainly watching what other councils are doing with that, because that is quite a fast-moving process, and councils have certain opportunities to feed into the decision-making, but we have to be prepared and ready to take those if they do occur. So that's probably the main points, Mr. Chairman. Have we taken any questions or feedback?
Thank you, Bruce. Very full report. The report now up for discussion. Jeremy.
Mr. Chairman, just in regards to intensive winter grazing applications, there's a few people, just how many, just out of interest?
Yeah, we've only had 4 applications to date. A couple of those have been multi-farm applications, but we certainly had indications from consultants that even though some of these, or the bulk of the provisions, have been deferred to next year, there's certainly a number of their clients that are looking to get into the game and lodge applications, give themselves some certainty for the future. So I don't have an exact number on that, how much might be coming this season, but we're certainly looking to try and make a process available that is pretty clear for that, and try and make it easy for people to lodge applications, give us the information we need, and cut out some of the to and fro.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just follow on from that? I'd actually quite like to understand it a bit fuller. Maybe you could present to the council what that looks like, what information you're looking for, and what's triggering a consent over and above the permitted activity. Because I think there's a number of triggers sitting in there, but I think for us, because we get a number of people ask us without actually going to the council, they said, I don't want to go to the council and actually put a red flag up, or, I don't want, what is actually happening there, and what are they looking for, and what would a process look like that if I did go in? Because as you're right, there's multiple farms and there's land being sold. I think we've had the busiest 2 months of land sales for quite some time. The book really for real estate agents is probably the least it's been for a long time. So there's been a number of transactions we need to keep ahead of it. And also around the ponds, I'd actually quite like to get an understanding of that, because I've had a lot of questions that I've passed on to the consents and compliance, especially with alterations of ponds or upgrading existing ponds. The existing plan doesn't deal with that well, and we need to get a better framework so we know what a drop test is for and what size and those sorts of things. I think there's quite a bit of confusion and dialogue around there. And the third thing is picking up a point that you raised the other day, Mr. Chairman, outside of this meeting, was some consultants seem to be bleeding our if I said the applicant around process and costs that are far in excess of what I would have thought would have been a reasonable cost. Not our cost, but the consultant's cost and what you have to do and what it's going to be like. I don't think it's that well connected is what we think. I think it's better connected, but in reality, the case that you raised with me was the gentleman didn't have a high level of reading and writing, and was relying on a third party to do his work for him, and he didn't understand some of these systems and processes that were in place. So it tells me that the client's not linked into the process of seeing information go back and forwards between ourselves and the consultant, what they're asking for and what timeframes and what money that generates up. So an eye-watering account for what I thought was just a rollover consent process.
I raised the matter with Bruce with two issues here. One was the advice of the consultant to the applicant that we were only awarding 10-year consents and nothing longer than that, which I hadn't been aware of, so Bruce will be able to answer that one. The other one was whether the consultant had mentioned or had taken advantage of the free consultation. So we can't talk about the details of a particular application because it's been sorted. But Bruce, do you want to address those two things?
Yeah, through Mr. Chairman. Firstly, with regard to Councillor McCallum's query about demonstrating the intensive winter grazing platform, once we've got that live, very happy to present that for everybody's information. Secondly, around the dairy structures, I can certainly forward to yourselves, just for your information, the information that's gone out to consultants for feedback on the type of changes that we're looking at considering. With regard to the liaison that, I guess, clients have through their consultant with us. Often people will make a pre-application meeting, and sometimes they come in with their consultant, sometimes the consultant alone, and sometimes the farmer on their own. But probably most often we're dealing through consultants. We do seek to copy applicants into an email train so they've got a level of visibility around that. I'd probably be a bit loath to make any comments on whether the charging regime from those consultants is appropriate or not. We're certainly trying to give people as much as we can, and I've covered a wee bit in the report here, some level of visibility around what's straightforward and what's less than straightforward, and in particular, indicative costs of the process. And most people want to know, how hard is it, how long is it going to take, and what's it going to cost me in general terms. So we're trying to provide a level of visibility around that, in particular try and be reasonably clear as to what is straightforward or relatively straightforward and what isn't. One interesting point that came through from the Consultants Forum last week was some concerns about costs of some small-scale structures like culverts, the cost of the consenting process. Under the proposal on land plan, there's a permitted activity criteria for culverts, which was reasonably straightforward. When the National Environmental Standards came in on the 3rd of September last year, Regulation 70 covers culverts and created quite an interesting regime there where it adds a whole level of complexity to culverts, and most of the time it's triggering resource consents. So that's certainly been a bit of a bone of contention with the sector, that this new National Environmental Standard is creating some additional regulatory costs and processes. Unfortunately, from their perspective, it is what it is. It's the law. We can't ignore it. We've got to give effect to it. We're trying to be as clear as we can as far as what the information we need.
Just before I go to Councillor Beard, could you just answer the question I had, that do we have a policy which says we're only granting consents for up to 10 years?
No, we don't have a formal policy on that. Each application, we have to consider the term, which can obviously be anything up to 35 years. Liaising with the other regional councils around the country, there's quite a discussion on consent terms, and generally speaking, they are getting shorter. Environment Canterbury, for instance, have indicated that they will really be granting consents in excess of 10 years. Normally for dairying consents, we're landing around the 15-year mark. Can be some instances where we're moving more towards 10 years if there's some particular sensitivities in particular areas, but usually it's somewhere between 10 and 15 years.
Thank you. Councillor Beard.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So just on the AB Lyme limited notified hearing, so there is a lot of community interest in that particular case. Are we under any obligations to advertise that hearing, or is it largely going to be up for the media to acknowledge that that's on and where it is?
Well, it's a public hearing, and we can certainly make information available that it is occurring. And we've done that through a number of media sources already to date. That the only parties with status to appear at that hearing are the people who've submitted and the applicant. So there may be potentially a large number of attendees, and we've planned around that when considering the venue, etc. But people who aren't either the applicant or submitter don't have status to speak.
So they can attend and listen.
They can attend and listen. The submissions that have been lodged are thorough and traverse all the issues. So the Commissioner Cubitt, all the consents sought are discretionary, so he has full discretion to grant or decline the consents that have been sought. So nothing's been decided on that at this point in time, and it won't be my decision. It'll be a decision of the Commissioner. The submissions, as I said, they're quite comprehensive. They traverse a range of issues. Another important element of that process is that we've already had a significant amount of external technical review. We don't have in-house landfill expertise, so we engaged a landfill engineer from Auckland, an air quality specialist and a geotechnical specialist to review the application when it was lodged. And we've kept those parties involved in the process, so they will actually be zooming into the hearing as well. So I think that's important because it's really important that we have an appropriate level of technical input into the decision making from the consent authority. So the applicant has their own experts and will be presenting their own evidence on that, but we've got a pretty important review / kaitiaki role in that respect.
Sure.
Follow-up question, it's on another matter that we sort of talked about earlier. The 190 kgs of nitrogen, at what point are we moving towards being able to receive information? Because when is there an obligation for that information to start coming to council?
Yeah, the reporting year kicks off from 2021. The obligation to report from the individual farmer falls on 1 July 2022. And we've had a bit of dialogue around that. It's quite a significant issue in Canterbury, where a lot of farmers are above the cap effectively, as I understand it. In Southland, obviously, it's still something we're legally required to report on. We've been liaising with the Ministry of the Environment about the reporting regime, because ideally you'd have some national consistency around that. You wouldn't have 16 regions doing their own thing, and the reporting framework for landowners would be clear and made easy for them, and we can also feed it in a consistent way. That clarity hasn't come through from the ministry as yet, but we're still working on it.
Does it need to be shown on a paddock basis, or is it just on a quantum basis?
Yeah, looking at the regulations, it looks like it's a quantum basis as opposed to a paddock by paddock basis, but we need some more clarity on that at a national level, and it's certainly something that comes up regularly.
Thank you. Chairman Hall?
Yes, just on the essential freshwater, and obviously that has been quite a win, that we could have had 3,000 or 4,000 consents for a short time, and the deferral, which is very much dependent on getting farm plans, in particular the intensive winter grazing module up and running, and I guess there's some pressure and urgency on that. There's been talk about a portal. We didn't comment on it, but how soon will we have something up and running for that?
We're hoping we can have a platform available by mid-April. At the moment, there's nothing really proposed that I'm aware of in terms of a nationally consistent module around this. So councils are, to some extent, each council is doing their own thing on it. We've been liaising quite closely with Environment Canterbury and Otago Regional Council to try and obtain a level of consistency across the regions. So we're generally taking a similar type of approach between the three southern regional councils.
What about the industry good organisations? I know Beef and Lamb are working on something. I think probably have something. I guess it's not trying to reinvent the wheel. If we can get some consistency with what's already out there, it's good. Yeah.
Yes, and as you say, there's a number of different entities who have their own module that they're making available to their members to help them with this process, which is good. So we don't need to reinvent that wheel, but we certainly need to make a platform available where people can lodge easily and have some clarity around that.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. Is there any further commentary or questions for this report? If not, can I ask somebody to move the recommendation, please? We note this to the report. Thank you. Councillor Major, seconded Councillor Beard. No further discussion for the motion. Please, please say aye.
Aye.
Everyone happy? Thank you.
Mr. Chief,
Thanks,
we
Bruce.
recognise the new acting consents manager too, if we had him in the room before. I know that we have.
Not in that role.
Okay.
It's his first putting toes in the water. Thank you, Bruce. So item 2 is the Environmental Compliance Division report from the Compliance Manager, Simon Mann. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you. Kia ora tātou. Ko te pane māhau, te manga, ko marakau te awa, no ingarangi ahau, ko Matt taku whānau, ko Simon taku ingoa. So my name's Simon Mapp, I'm originally from England and I grew up in Māngere in South Auckland. The report I take has been largely read by councillors, but I'll just highlight that we had 474 discharge permit inspections conducted over this time period, and you can see the ratings there, a high number of fully compliant ratings, which is good to see. 22 industry inspections with 491 industry consent conditions audited, and 5 meeting with major consent holders. In the time period, we had 265 incidents reported to us, and you can see the ratings there. Obviously, air remains large at 111. The current situation in the compliance department is that staffing has been an issue. We're we're recruiting new staff. That should be an assistance to us, but on the government's request, we're applying a lot of resources to the increased monitoring of the Tiwai aluminium smelter site. That comes along with many legoimas, so request for official information. And at the moment, we're currently running at about 6 to 8 in any one time, which is a huge drain on resources. We are starting to fill the NES and the MPS, and also the government has requested that there's an increased CME on the intensive winter grazing, compliance monitoring and enforcement on the intensive winter grazing. The work plan that we work to for through to 2025, reducing the discharges and improving water quality. As you can see, we're monitoring the consents of both the dairy discharges and the urban water qualities. Reducing air qualities, unfortunately, we can't do much with that due to the lack of resources. We do, however, continue to work with good wood suppliers and make sure that people have access to dry, clean, burning wood. Responding to incidents for request or calls for service, we've done that increased prioritisation to after-hours on-call service. So we have one officer attend on-call incidents, and we're just ensuring their safety is increased by the fact that we have a higher prioritisation. Obviously, when you're attending something solo, there's huge risks that go with that. We are attending low-risk issues when possible or where possible. But again, due to resources, it's highly likely that we won't do that. Monitoring water quantity, we're still developing the high-rate water takes, so the telemetered 5 litres plus per second coming in, and we're just managing the 2 computer systems that we've got to transfer information between to ensure that that's being recorded in our IRIS system. We're addressing some of the data issues we're getting there and some of the telemetered issues that consent holders are finding. And we're starting on the groundwater monitoring work. Reducing impacts on the coastal areas, we've just we've completed whitebait inspections, and as of today, we've completed the coastal structures and the aquaculture inspections on Stewart Island. So you can see the incidents are attached and enforcement actions are attached. That's the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Simon. Stephen Hall first.
Yes, you mentioned the intensive winter grazing surveillance. A couple of questions. One, government will want to see quarterly reporting. Have we had a template yet with what we need there, and are we planning any surveillance flights that would sort of, I guess, identify any properties that look risky that could get a bit of education before the winter?
So we're working closely with Land Sustainability Department to look at high risks. I believe they're running a cultivation flight where they fly over to areas and identify anywhere with high risk. And from there, I believe there will be a backup flight at a later date, and that's resources allowed. So we've, I think it will be a compliance check of that particular area. Obviously, help will be offered to the people that are in high-risk areas, and it's then up to that landowner if they choose to take that help. However, if they're later on found to be non-compliant, well, obviously, they've had the opportunity of assistance at that time.
Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, there's 2 things. One, can I just follow on from Chairman Horrell? I understand what you're saying, Simon, but regardless of that, the industry is going to be branded by the bad performance. And I understand that in the region we had one particular person that was convicted last year of replanting the crop in the same area again. I think we need somehow to get on the front foot and possibly even, I'm not sure what the media looks like on that, but when we had DRNZ in here, they were pretty keen to do the follow-up, whether it was through a neutral party like Feds or whatever. We need to get in front of this because this could be, well, we know there's people going to be out there looking this year, and especially in July, late July, they'll be looking and bringing some of the stuff forward. So we need to be in front of this stuff, I think, and the pre-work, I think, is more important in some respects of making people aware. So, you know, effectively the world's got eyes on us in some respects.
So through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, totally agree. I believe land sustainability, working with Federated Farmers and Beef and Lamb and Dairy NZ, and they're making those visits prior to any issues showing up. It is totally up to the individual whether they take that advice or do anything differently. I suppose there is a desire from the government for increased monitoring and enforcement where people haven't followed the correct procedures.
I agree. Mr. Chairman, if I could, my second part is, in the incident reporting, when I was reading it through, it is obvious that there's more written in some of those columns than is actually appearing here. The sentence stops partway through, and there's obviously more information that's sitting there in the resolution summary column than what you've actually stated. And it's a bit hard to tell how you've actually got to where you got to.
Yeah. No, I see that. I see that issue. It does, when we do expand it, it does take it out to a number of pages, because some of the resolutions can go on, but we can change that if you.
I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, with your approval, are we actually getting what we want out of this form? And is there a slightly better way or a summary form at a governance level that we could basically see? I'm just wondering whether going through page after page.
What more detail do you want to see?
Well, that's for the question. That's the question. And I'm just wondering whether there's too much here, and I'd like it, I'm just suggesting out loud when I say this summary. There's a number of burning issues that seem to be commonality about them. There's some discharge issues that seem to be some strong commonality about them. I'm not sure whether we're actually getting the value out of those pages that what was intended. I'm just asking the question to see whether there's a better way to record that for us.
I see what you're talking about, but it's sort of an open-ended question.
Yeah, it is.
So we have to tell the manager of consents what we want to know. And I'm sure that will then be included in that spreadsheet. So just leaving it open actually probably doesn't help him a lot. If there are particular things missing that we might want to know about.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, we could certainly filter it down to high risk incidents and get rid of some of the lower risk incidents. What the concern there is, as an incident is reported, it can seem to be quite low risk and then end up as extremely high risk. So we might be missing some of those, I suppose, those incidents, but it would be easier to read.
Chairman Horrell's next.
Yes, well, just on that topic before we move to the other question, I'm quite happy with getting that information, and it's always sort of been the practice that if councillors wanted more information, that they sort of go and ask. But it does give us, with those compliance things, it's actually quite good to see them, and if there was something that's a red flag, rather than having more information, there's the ability to go and ask people. But the second one, just on the on land sustainability, we had, working with the industry groups, we've reactivated the winter grazing group, had their first meeting yesterday. They will start, then it might drop off, but everybody's well aware that one or two poor performers could be detrimental to the whole industry. The Federated Farmers will set up an 0800 number again, which will direct any concerns back to the region, initially as for education, so they will try and line up somebody to go and talk to somebody. But I think there was a couple of cases last year when people wouldn't do anything, that they were actually referred to regional council. I'm not sure we had any here, but I think Otago did. So it's actually quite good, because it's education first, but there's also the ability to pass things on if people aren't doing the right thing. talking to David Cable from Fonterra last week, and he was pointing out that changes to legislation just before the election now allows them not to decline to pick up milk, and also indicating that they are going to move to premiums for good environmental practice. So there's things happening that can be more effective possibly than we can just using all the tools that are available. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Beard.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a question really, I mean, this report's quite complete, so it's quite long, but it does sort of highlight it, I guess initially if there's someone's name on there that's of wider interest. So do media have to do a look, the GOMA to get more information on those particular cases, or is that information largely available to everybody?
So through you, Mr. Chair, there's a number of rules that go with a LGOIMA request, so a Local Government Official Information Meetings Act request. The principle is that most things are available to the public, and all they need to do is ask for it. They pay the wages, therefore the information should be given to them. However, there are a number of restrictions, such as if we're currently under an investigation, we won't release any information at that particular time. We won't release the information on people that have given us information about other people. So anonymous informants or informants will remain anonymous. And there's a number of trade issues. If the request is requesting too much information, etc., it's going to take too long to collate. So there's a number of issues where refusal can happen, but we try and work with the requester to get that information to them.
Thank you. So Councillor McCallum has asked a question about whether the report should be refined or whether we should have more information on it. Does anybody else believe that we should change what we've got there? We need to give some direction to the consents manager if we're going to get changes. We want time to think about it.
Sometimes, Mr. Chairman, the compliance officer has a view of how you'd like to present the data as well. I just raised a question.
Well, you may wish to talk to him directly about that offline. I think the chairman was less explicit than he might have been. I think the minister and government will hold us and the farming community to account if there are any breaches of the winter grazing rules. And there'll be people out there actively looking for those breaches so they can publicise them and pillory all of us. So I think we need to be conscious of that. The farming community are being made aware of it. It's really up to them to get it right. But was this council helped organise the group that went to Wellington and persuaded the minister to make some changes or delay making changes rather. But I think it's pretty plain that if there are any breaches, then we're going to be tarred with the same brush. So we need to keep that in mind. Are there any other questions or commentary regarding this? David?
Yeah, no, good report, thanks, Simon. Councillor Ludlow asked me to ask a question. The 11th to the 11th, 20, is that a full moon?
I'm going to say yes. I believe we had a number of incidents on that particular day. Was that?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It was, I don't know if there's any correlation between the number of incidents and lunar events, but I can get a team of experts to look at it.
Special report the next time, next year for Colin. Phases of the moon will be included. Councillor McPhail.
I was just going to make a comment. I went to this regards to compliance, a strategy meeting with an industry, and obviously me being from environment south, and certainly got some fingers pointed saying, well, why aren't you prosecuting? You're just going to prosecute. But the same people were saying, we don't need rules, we don't need rules. And I just basically said to them, well, if you don't have rules, you can't prosecute. And they hadn't really worked. And they might have been across the border indicating this. It was quite an interesting discussion. If you need to be hard, I need to prosecute. I said, you ain't got rules. You can't actually enforce things. So, but I did indicate that Southland does prosecute, probably more than their share of the regional councils, so which they didn't probably realise too. So certainly interesting feelings out there, but lack of information too.
The number of prosecutions is not a measure of the success of the organisation. Like, the number of prosecutions isn't related really to actually how good things are or how bad things are out there. It just shows somebody's reached the level where they can be prosecuted, and we've had that described to us the steps that are taken before we get to that.
Certainly a indication how two provinces are working side by side with a complete, I think we're sitting in a pretty good position dealing with this, and ones are running to catch up or not understanding there's a lot coming in due course, I think. So.
In your first part of your report, you say there was a number of industry inspections. Were there any breaches there? There's no mention of any breaches or warnings or...
No, I think in this particular case, a number of the industry inspections were taken up by one particular industry on the Tiwai Peninsula.
Okay.
It's not that has been reported to me. There's been no serious breaches.
Yes, Councillor McKenna.
Mr. Chairman, is it your view that sometime in the future we'll get an update on what your compliance has found in the Tiwai site? I presume that there is, the government's been quite public about what is or isn't down there, and do we, and I would quite like to know what that site looks like after the years and years of activity down there, and that will actually draw out the plan of how do we either mitigate or remedy some of the issues that are down there. It'd be nice to see some sort of reporting back at some stage in the future.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that shouldn't be a problem. We're reporting to our council anyway, so I'll make sure that's noted.
Are there any other questions or commentary for the manager of compliance?
Move the resolution, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Horrell. Seconded by Mr. Stevens. Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Simon, for your...
Could I just add, this is my last regulatory committee before I leave and go to Pastures Green. I'd firstly like to apologise. I didn't get the suit memo that my peer did, and therefore I appeared before you underdressed. And I'd just also like to say over the last 8 years that I've been the compliance manager, it's been a pleasure presenting these reports and just having chats with you. At times have been challenging, but I've really appreciated your feedback. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon, for all your good work, and you can wear a suit in your next position if you wish.
We were expecting a slideshow at the end, like you normally do.
Great sets. Yeah, well, yeah. So if time allows, I would like